Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it is indeed an honour and a privilege to rise in this House today to share some comments on today's Supply Day motion. Now, Mr. Speaker, as you know, Supply Day motions are an opportunity for we, as the opposition, to hold the government to account. And, Mr. Speaker, there sure is a lot to hold this government to account on. Just look at the litany of tax increases that they have undertaken in the 3 short years they've been in office, as clearly articulated by the mover of this motion, the honourable member for Carleton. And Mr. Speaker, Canadians in my riding of Perth-Wellington, and indeed Canadians across the country, are noticing this. They're noticing this because they see the government time and time again spending more money than they take in. They see a government that in the election campaign promised teeny tiny budgets of $10 billion. $10 billion for 3 short years. And by 2019, they'd be back in the black. By 2019, this very year, they promised Canadians, hand over heart, 3 short years of deficit, and then we'd be back to balanced budget. But of course, Mr. Speaker, that did not happen. And so, Mr. Speaker, this Opposition Day motion lays out very clearly the views of this opposition when it comes to this government's tax increases. We want a clear commitment in writing that the Liberals will cease their tax increases on Canadians. Because, Mr. Speaker, Canadians in my riding of Perth-Wellington and Canadians across the country are finding the cost of living to be going up. At the end of each month, they notice there's not a lot left. They might be making ends meet, they might be getting by, but that's about it. They're struggling. So at the end of each month, they sit down at the kitchen tables across this country, and they look at their expenses, and they look at what they've brought in. And they know, as Conservatives know, they have to make those numbers balance. They have to make the tough decisions. They have to decide whether or not they can put off that needed house repair for maybe that much longer. They have to decide whether or not they'll be able to sock away a little bit of money for a rainy day fund. And they have to make difficult decisions for their kids and for their future. Do they have enough money that month to put a little bit away for an RESP, to plan for their kids' future education? Do they have a little bit of money that maybe they could enroll the kids in a sporting activity, in soccer, in swimming lessons? Or are they going to have to forego that because money's tight? Parents have to make those tough decisions. Canadians have to make those tough decisions. Small businesses have to make that tough decision. The small business owner has to decide whether or not there's enough left over at the end of the month to reinvest in his business or to pay him or herself a salary that month. I talk to small business owners in my riding, as my colleagues talk to the small business owners across the country. And they're finding it tough. They're finding it tough because of the challenges that this Liberal government has put before them. And it's not just in my riding, Mr. Speaker. It's in ridings across this country. In a neighbouring riding to mine, Kitchener South Hespeler, I've had some great conversations with the Conservative candidate there, Mr. Alan Kiesel. Now, Alan Kiesel is going to be a great MP when he arrives in this House in a few short months' time. You know, Alan, he has 2 master's degrees from Oxford, where he also played on the Oxford hockey team. He was a member of the Canadian Armed Forces. But most importantly, he listens to his community. He listens to his neighbours. He listens to the people on the doorstep, what their concerns are, what's happening in their community. And what he's hearing in Kitchener South Hespeler reflects what a lot of us are hearing across the country, that families are finding it tough, that the question of affordability is constantly there. And they're concerned about a carbon tax. They're concerned that the carbon tax is going to end up being a tax on everything, that it's going to increase the cost of everyday items that families rely on, like groceries, like getting to and from work, like working, like their small businesses. It becomes a tax on all of it. And they're concerned about the other changes as well. The increased payroll taxes, a tax both on the individual but also on the employer. The increases that those are happening. You know, talking to Alan, he says that Families are just shaking their heads over the Liberal spending and how they can blow so much money today that is going to cause increases in taxes down the road to pay for these Liberals' mismanagement. And you know, Alan related a story to me about a small business owner he was talking to. And this particular small business owner had to let employees go because he said that the incentive was gone from growing his business. And that incentive is gone because of these Liberals. And that's wrong. Now, Alan was telling me that this particular business owner raised his concerns at the time that the Liberals' tax changes were proposed 2 summers ago. And this constituent, this business owner in Kitchener South Hespeler, raised his concerns with the honourable member from Kitchener South Hespeler, and nothing. He found no support from his local MP when he raised the concerns about the disastrous proposals that the Liberal Minister of Finance proposed on small businesses. Shameful, Mr. Speaker. Absolutely shameful. But there is hope, Mr. Speaker. There's hope because Conservatives are listening. Conservatives in places like Kitchener South Hespeler and across the country, they're listening to their constituents. They're listening to the concerns of Canadians. And those concerns are real. I talked to seniors. Seniors are concerned. A lot of seniors have spent their lives preparing for their retirement, putting money away, ensuring that when the time came for them to retire, they could live comfortably. They're not living extravagantly. They're not blowing their money. They're simply living and enjoying what quite rightfully they're entitled to. But they're concerned. Now that they're on a fixed income, they're concerned about what these Liberals are going to do to their lives. They're concerned about the cost of heating their home. They're concerned about the cost of their groceries. And they're concerned about the cost of medication as well, which is not going to be helped by these Liberals' concessions in the recent NAFTA negotiations. And the Liberals are offering them false, and I would dare say dishonest hope when they flout their changes to CPP. But in fact, Mr. Speaker, the changes proposed with payroll tax increases to CPP will not come into play into the full degree until 2065, offering a false hope to today's seniors. And we all know, Mr. Speaker, that today's budget deficits are tomorrow's tax increases. Indeed, according to the Department of Finance's own numbers, the budget will not be balanced until 2040. 2040. I have 3 kids. I have 3 young kids, Ainsley, Bennett, and Caroline. Ainsley, my 4-year-old, will be 26 years old by the time this budget's finally passed. My 9-month-old Caroline will be 22 years old. She'll be graduating from university by the time the budget is finally balanced. And their generation will be paying the tax increases caused by the nearly $1 trillion in debt that will exist by the year 2040. And that debt financing, year after year, is not going to investments in the concerns of Canadians. It's not helping to build infrastructure in rural communities in places like Mapleton, in St. Mary's, in Perth South, in Listowel, or in Mitchell, or in Stratford, or in Milverton. They're not building infrastructure. It's being wasted on increased deficit and debt financing charges because these Liberals have not lived within their means. Canadians were sold a bill of goods in 2015. They were promised 3 short years and a return to budget balanced by 2019. That hasn't happened. Mr. Speaker, Conservatives will always stand up for Canadian taxpayers. And come October 2019, we will once again tell Canadians that we'll be standing on the side of Canadian families, Canadian taxpayers, and small business owners. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.